Good morning, Kansas City. This is Patrick Tuohey sitting in for Pete Mundo, Kansas City's second favorite Patrick, and I have got Attorney General Catherine Hanaway with me. We're going to talk about that lawsuit that we've been discussing over the last 45 minutes or so. General Hanaway, good morning.
Good morning, Patrick. Thanks so much for having me on. And before we get into the really serious topic of the lawsuit, I just want to say congratulations to everybody in Kansas City. Like, the city just shone during the World Cup. It showed the whole world what an awesome region we have.
Well, you're very kind. Although, if you want to talk about the money we spent to get all that adulation, that's a whole different subject. Before we begin, one quick question. Can you fix parking tickets?
No, I can't.
All right. Well, then we'll move on to the lawsuit. So I just had an opportunity to speak with Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas about this exact issue. And, I put it to him that the city conceded. Well, let me back up a little bit for the sake of the listeners. So, the Supreme Court has been saying for a number of years that you are allowed to discriminate based on race and sex if you are addressing past issues, right? Past discrimination. And in order to demonstrate that, because the city has to prove that they're actually addressing something, in order to do that, cities take on these diversity studies. And that is exactly what Kansas City did. And the study came back and said, looking at 7 years of contracting data, minority and women-owned firms are either at parity or overperform what we would expect based on their percentage of the marketplace. Now, I read that and thought, well, this is great news. I mean, what a success for any city, for any state to be able to say we've overcome this kind of original sin of, American democracy, of American government. Yet, the city council pushed back. They decided not to change their policy. And when I talked to the mayor earlier this morning, I kind of said, you're a fan of discrimination. What would it take to change your mind? And of course, there's no answer. He maybe suggested that they would do a secondary study because they didn't get the answers they wanted, or maybe they would cast a wider net and want to look at not just city contracting, but regional contracting, including parts of Kansas. So all of that is to say, your lawsuit kind of alleges all this, alleges the ongoing discrimination, points out that it's a violation of the Constitution. How do you nail down a city that wants to keep the definitions as vague and as shifting as possible? Is it just a matter of black and white law? Because I'm no attorney, but it seems like your suit is as black and white as any suit could be.
Absolutely, and thank you for noticing that. Look, this is going to be a issue on which we have to be persistent. And so not only are we going to point to the last study that was done, but there was even a study done as far back as 2016 that said there wasn't this pattern of discrimination. And so the city council then decided that they would have this program. To the extent that the program worked, congratulations, Kansas City. That's a good, positive thing. Let's all celebrate the win. My job is to enforce the Missouri Human Rights Act and the U.S. Constitution. And clearly what Kansas City is doing now is discriminating on the basis of race and gender. And look, I want the whole country to get past the point where we're doing that in how we admit people to college, how we select contractors for work by the government, and, how people treat people every day. Like, let's grow up, America, and get to the point where we treat everybody fairly. And when a city hires the contractor to do a job, they're hiring them because they're the best qualified, most meritorious, and going to do it for the best price.
How often has either you or your predecessors filed a lawsuit like this against a municipality in Missouri?
It's hard to quantify municipalities. The last really high-profile suit we filed was against the Missouri High School Athletic Association or Activity Association. They were holding 2 board spots for either women or minorities, which is clearly discrimination on its face. We've had lawsuits recently against IBM and Starbucks for discriminatory practices in their hiring and promotion and compensation. It is something we utilize frequently. I don't know that we've filed a suit against another municipality since I've been in office, but it's a big office with a lot of people doing a lot of things, so I can't say that with certainty.
I imagine, because regardless of who sits in your position there, getting a lawsuit filed against you by any state attorney general is is intimidating. And I imagine a lot of, whether it's businesses or associations or municipalities, are quickly looking to fold, or at least, clean up their act. Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know how this works, but would it be conceivable that a city or an association that the AG's office is suing would come to you and say, all right, how can we address your concerns in a way that makes this go away? Or is it once you file a suit, we're going to court?
I would say on this issue, people tend to fight back a little harder. And I think it's because there is some level of we better be able to defend our position, because nobody wants to get labeled, certainly in a court order, as engaging in discrimination and racism. And so there tends to be a fight. Ultimately, though, most of these cases do settle. But initially, the other side usually comes out, kind of throwing haymakers until, we just come back with that kind of same persistence. Well, here's what the evidence says. The evidence is overwhelming. We wouldn't have filed the suit unless we really thought we had all the evidence to prove our points.
So one of the things the mayor suggested, he's difficult to pin down, and that's by design, of course. But one of the things he suggested was, ongoing research. So I can imagine a scenario in which City A conducts a diversity study. It shows that, they don't have the factual predicate, as Griffin and Strong told Kansas City, to continue the program. They pause it or they stop it, but then they do a subsequent study which finds that, maybe it was just the corrective yet discriminatory policies of the city that kind of gave us the good outcome. If the city were to stop its positive discrimination, you might call it, then, we would kind of go back to the wolves. I don't know if I'm being clear or not, but
yeah, no, I understand the point. If they get a new study that says, but for this wonderful program, there would have been discrimination in the Kansas City area. Then in terms of our lawsuit, it just becomes a battle of the experts. But I think the experts and the factual evidence will weigh heavily in our favor. I think we're going to be able to put on the stand not just the plaintiff in this case, but as the case progresses, I'm certain we'll have other contractors in the Kansas City area come forward and say, wait a minute, I submitted a bid and here's what it looked like. And this other contractor was picked over me based on race and gender, not on merit and quality of work and price.
Do you, so you raise a good point. I imagine, and I'm familiar with Kansas City, so I can certainly imagine it being true here, that it is a small enough market that if you are an aggrieved contractor and you believe you've been the victim of discrimination, there is a lot of good reason for you to just keep your mouth shut. Now, maybe that means it's tough to find a plaintiff when you file a lawsuit like this, or maybe you count on people showing up after you filed because they didn't want to be the first mover. I don't know how to quantify that, but that's got to be a real thing, that if you're working in one market, you don't want to rock the boat.
Absolutely, because the very work that you're competing for is being selected by people that you're suing. Like our plaintiff in our case has had a number of city contracts. He's lost other city contracts. It did take us some time to find somebody who was exemplary of the people who've been discriminated against, and that's really what the plaintiff is in this case. The state is we're bringing our claims on our behalf, but also on the behalf of this plaintiff. And it did take some time to find him, and I do suspect that after seems like there's a little more protection from retaliation, we'll be able to get many others to come forward.
A lot of the coverage has been really disappointing from my point of view in Kansas City, whether it's, individual bloggers or opinion writers, or it's even kind of the editors who choose the headlines for otherwise good stories. They have wanted to drum this up as a culture war issue. They've spent time talking about you personally, and making this, again, culture war, or talking about the plaintiff personally. What they haven't done is talk about the merits of the case. Like, it's really very shocking. A blogger who used to be a legal correspondent for the Kansas City Star, you'd think would be the perfect guy to talk about the legal merit, yet he didn't do that at all. I guess my question is, you've got a thick skin. You've got to in that job. Does this surprise you? Does it disappoint you? And maybe the broader question is this just common? Should I not be surprised about this? It happens all the time.
I don't think you should be surprised. And, in all these people who are bright, capable writers, in this one instance, good legal mind, avoid the legal arguments, it's pretty good evidence that we're right on the legal arguments, because they can't go into the substance, because it is factually true that Kansas City in its contracting is discriminating, and the law no longer allows you to do that. And for a long time, these kinds of programs were allowed by the courts, but they aren't anymore. And so I think part of it is that people just haven't kind of made that shift in their mind to what the law is today.
Yeah.
And this isn't personal for me. I swore an oath to uphold the law. And the law says you can't discriminate on the basis of race or gender. And Kansas City is discriminating on the basis of race and gender. And so it's my job to enforce the law that says you can't do that.
So last question, General. What are the next steps? I see I've got a copy of the case. You filed it. I imagine there's going to be a time before I don't know what comes next. And then, of course, there's depositions and hearings. How long before you get into a courtroom? And then how long before this is adjudicated?
Yeah, so I would imagine that Kansas City's going to fight it with every possible tool, which means they'll file a motion to dismiss. After we do some discovery, they'll file a motion for summary judgment. We're talking about months, perhaps even more than a year before we get to resolution on this case. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for the mayor to keep talking about it. And, with respect to this idea that you can broaden the population from which you do a study, I mean, that is like taking a political poll. And if you don't like what the voters in the district say, well, then, okay, let's throw in another district and see if I get a better result that way. It's just not valid.
Yeah, no, that's right. That reminds me of the line, what we're big in Denmark. I forget what movie it is. General Hanaway, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me this morning, and thanking for your work on behalf of all Kansas Cityans who care about this type of stuff, for taking the time and dedicating the energy to do it. I look forward to reading more about this, and maybe we'll have the opportunity to talk again when the case moves along. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Have a great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was General Hanaway. We've heard kind of both sides. Obviously, I've got my own view, but what I want to ask people in Kansas City is, if you're going to talk about this issue, whether you're a reporter or a blogger or something else, please focus on the merits. Keep personality out of it. Keep ideology out of it. This is a lawsuit. We are perfectly capable of reading it and making good arguments. When you get vulgar or when you accuse the other side of being disingenuous, you do damage to your own argument. This is Patrick Tuohey sitting in for Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio.